Hello, I'm Dong-Gyu Lee from Hanmaum Church in Chinchon. Till I was 49 years old, I couldn't escape my impulses to gamble or to commit suicide. But through the gospel, I was changed, and I'd like to tell you how. When I was in my 20s, I had a decent job for 3 years, but I got bored with it. So I quit and went into Pohang to my sister's place to work in the distribution industry. While I was apprenticing for the industry, I had a brief period where I had worked as a cab driver. That's when I learned gambling for the first time in my life. I was 29 years old then. At first, the cabbie started gambling for fun, and it would have been okay if I stopped there, but once I started, I just couldn't stop gambling. It was all about reading other people's intentions, hiding mind, and cheating and being cheated. It was very fresh and fun to me. The best part was winning money. It was such a great pleasure to win money that I couldn't stop. When I lost money, say $100, I told myself that I'd never do it again. But the very next day, I started again because winning, even a few dollars, was fun. It was so much fun that I couldn't even remember how much I'd lost. At the time, I was on a 24-hour rotation shift. At first, I only gambled on my 10-minute break, but when you're supposed to be washing the car, I began to gamble more and more. But at some point, gambling small money with other cabbies didn't satisfy me anymore. So I looked for bigger game and began to hang out with professional gamblers. Back then, I'd been saving up to open my own business. But as I started to gamble with those professionals, I started to break into my savings. Then I lost so much that I just wanted to regain what I had lost and then quit playing. Looking back now, it was really stupid of me. When you think about it, it's impossible to win against professional gamblers. It's like trying to crack a rock with an egg. I didn't even regain what I'd lost. I just kept losing more and more money. Finally, I realized that it was impossible to regain my money through gambling. It actually turned out that all the money was going to the gambling house. So, I set up my own gambling house, and I opened a pool hall right next door to avoid getting busted by the police. We usually call it a house or site or pentagi. By running the gambling house, I got back all my money I'd lost, but I couldn't quit gambling because the easy money was too tempting. Plus, I made about $2,000 to $3,000 a day through the gambling house. That's about $70,000 to $80,000 per month. But I also had to spend $400 to $500 a day for alcohol, cigarettes, etc. Back then, we used pagers instead of cell phones, and my monthly pager bill was about $200. That was close to the monthly wage of laborers at the Pohang Steel Company. Because I earned money so easily, I also spent it easily for gambling or entertainment and lived luxuriously. At the time, I had a 2-year-old son and a 5-year-old daughter. You're supposed to enjoy spending time with your kids, but I don't even remember how they grew up. I was so into gambling that I didn't pay attention to my family at all. I did everything that I wanted, but I was always anxious about being busted by the police. The police can only make an arrest if they catch you in the act. So I set up a closed-circuit TV at the entrance of the gambling house. But I always was extremely anxious, because you never knew when the police would catch us. When the police make a raid, people jump out of the window from second or third floor to avoid arrest. Some people break their neck or legs, or even become handicapped while trying to flee. The gambler sitting beside you can be in prison the next day. That's the reality of gambling. I never was arrested, but every time I went to the police station when called in for questioning, I really wanted to quit this way of life. But escaping the gambling addiction was impossible with willpower alone. I tried so hard to escape this addiction, but it was not easy. Meanwhile, I became physically and mentally exhausted. Then my wife asked for a divorce, and I actually thought it was the only thing I could do for her. She didn't need to live with a messed up loser like me. So I signed the papers. Now that my family had broken apart because of my gambling, all I had left was the desire to die. There were so many thoughts that made me want to die, thoughts that hurt my self-esteem. You're useless. The thoughts made me look down upon myself, and I felt like it'd be better to have a short life. So then, let's just die. My head was filled with thoughts about suicide. Later, when I started to go to church, I realized that there really was a spiritual world. I could believe clearly that the whole world was under the control of the evil one. You see, the evil one really did plant suicidal thoughts in my head. He reminded me of all the suicide scenes I'd seen on TV or film. Hanging myself, falling off a building, drowning in the sea. And he taught me how to do these things in detail. So many times I got behind the wheel while I was totally drunk and drove like a madman for an hour, from Ponghang to Manghang rest area, to commit suicide. It felt like another force besides my own was dragging me into doing this. In the scriptures, it says that the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy, and I experienced those exact words. I drove at extreme speeds in the early morning, my tires screeching as I made wild turns on the dangerous road. I was even given the exact location. There's a cliff at the Manghang rest area. Kill yourself there. Then this thought embedded itself in my mind. I'm going to die off the cliff at Manghang rest area. So I tried to die there many times. One miss of the handle, and I'd go over the cliff. But at that moment, I think of my family and twist the handle at the last second. That was how I brushed past death many times. I decided I couldn't possibly continue to do this. So I got back together with my wife and got rid of the gambling house. But gambling wouldn't let go of me so easily. Gamblers kept contacting me, and I ended up gambling again. When I lost big money, I regretted it so much, but I was addicted, and I just couldn't quit gambling. I finally left Ponghang after I went completely bankrupt without a cent. My wife decided to move to Chuncheon for no reason. But when I think about it now, her coming to Chuncheon was truly an amazing way that God led us. She set up a small store. But when she couldn't work anymore because of her diabetic complications, I took up physical labor. One day, on my way back home from work, I was arrested for gambling debt and was sent to prison in Daegu. After that, my wife's health got worse and had to be hospitalized. In her hospital room, she met a member from the Hanmaum church and got to hear the gospel of the resurrection from her. My wife had been a Christian since birth, but she had left God for a very long time. I was in prison in Daegu. My wife was in Chuncheon, so she couldn't visit me. For people like us, the prisons provide video chat sessions where we can see each other. So my wife would go visit the Chuncheon prison to see me in Daegu through video chat. I was very surprised to see her on screen, because she didn't look sick. Rather, she was glowing in peace and happiness. And I thought, is she pretending to look well because she doesn't want me to worry about her? After serving a year in prison, I went back to my wife's place in Chuncheon. She was living in a small room in the basement. My heart ached so badly for her when I saw her place. I decided to go back to Ponghang and take up gambling once more in order to make money. While I was making preparations, the church members she met in the hospital came to visit us. As soon as they arrived, my wife was beside herself with happiness. In all of our years together, I've never seen her so happy. And when I first met these people, what I thought was that if angels did exist, they would probably be like these people. I saw them with my wife, and my heart just opened up to them. In all my years of gambling, all I had seen were people deceiving each other. But these people had no deception. Their faces had nothing but sincerity. They gave me one request. It was for me to visit their church. At that time, I had no interest or desire to go to church, but I decided to go for my wife, who didn't have long to live due to her diabetic complications. I wanted to do anything she wanted me to do while she was still here in this world. So I went to church for the first time in my life. I registered immediately and attended small church meetings with people who told my wife the gospel. I was happiest about the fact I can do something for my wife. So I made church activities my priority. I took up another job as a physical laborer because the hours suited that the best. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was living in a worthy way. After work, I'd go to small church service with a bundle of fruit in my arms. Then everyone there looked so happy to see me. I found that I couldn't wait to be there every day. Then I was hired as a driver at a private academy one of our church members ran. Meanwhile, my wife's health was getting worse. I was so busy going to work and nursing my wife. But the owner of the academy gave me a lot of help so that I could do both. God was amazingly good to me. I asked myself, if it weren't for His hand, would I be here today? God kept me in church for 5 years with the task of nursing my wife, till He brought me to stand here today. After 5 years of attending church, I was certain that I could trust these people. In my 20 years of gambling, I'd never trusted anyone. That's because among gamblers, everything that comes out of your mouth, with the exception of air, is a lie. For 20 years, I spent more time with gamblers than my family, but I never trusted any of them. I never opened my heart to them at all, and while I gambled, I only thought about my own gain. I didn't do anything that would be disadvantage to me. You see, that was the only way to survive in the world of gambling. When I met new people, I had to first figure whether they'd be beneficial to me or not. If they were not beneficial to me, I didn't even talk to them. And gamblers are like migratory birds. They can go anywhere, at any time, for money. Lots of people came and went from me, but there was nothing permanent in the gambling world. Living like that for 20 years, I began to miss genuine relationships. I began to miss people with whom I could share my heart, not just use for profit. I began to miss people who didn't leave me, but with whom I can spend my whole life with. I really wanted to open my heart to others. I had kept those doors tightly closed. With the experience I had in gambling, I could read other people's minds easily, and people at the Hanmaum church were so different from the gamblers I met. They didn't want anything from me, and they accepted me just as I was. My past and current situations didn't matter to them. I was finally among genuine people for the first time in 20 years. I had finally met people with whom I could share trust, not deception. I had met people with whom I could spend the rest of my life for the first time. In the gospel, they had accepted me, a stranger, as their eternal family without any conditions. God had opened my eyes to this church community, my eternal family. For me, being with this community, these people, was a heavenly life itself. My wife and I lived our best lives every day. Even as her health was getting worse, my wife shared the gospel with joy at her hospital room. After living such a joyful life, she went to the arms of the Lord. My wife's funeral was like a festival that I had never seen in this world. There was no sadness, Rather, it was joy itself, filled with a heavenly hope. Through my wife's funeral, I got to see clearly that this church community was my real family in heaven. During this time, I truly want to believe in the Christ they believed and to have assurance of heaven. I began to think deeply about the gospel I had heard countless times before, and something became clear to me. All this time, I thought gambling had ruined my life. I terribly regretted the fact that I had began gambling and couldn't quit. I blamed gambling for ruining my life, my suicidal attempts, and broken family. However, I found out why I couldn't help but have such a miserable life. It wasn't gambling that ruined my life. It was due to my sin of not believing in Jesus, who fulfilled everything with the resurrection and living as my own Lord. Because I had been my own Lord instead of Jesus, my life would have been bad even without gambling. My whole life, I regretted that I started gambling. But after that day, I regretted more the fact that I had lived not knowing Jesus. And with all my heart, I repented the sin of being my own Lord for 49 years. Amen. Then I received Jesus as my Lord in my heart. And he had me completely submit to him, who rose from the dead. Amen. Our pastor said, "The Almighty God came and went from this earth. Do you think he left no proof of that behind? God had solved the problems I feared and been deceived about the most, the problems of sin and death, and let me be reborn as a new being." Amen. The disciples had believed in the scriptures and Jesus' words only after his resurrection. In the same way, God gave me unshakable faith through the proof anyone can believe, the resurrection, not my experiences or conviction. Amen. My life changed after that. I used to be hopeless and think only about suicide, but God gave me clear purpose for life. The purpose of my life is to share the gospel with those who are living hopelessly because they don't know Jesus. Amen. I have everything in the Lord, and I live as a witness of the resurrection, giving the gospel to students who ride the bus I drive. Amen. I don't spend my time filled with regret for my past anymore. I live to complete the mission that God has given me with great love for souls. Amen. I no longer seek my own benefit in relationships, nor do I distrust people. Rather, I open my heart and accept them just as they are. The gospel lyrics, "It's all His grace," touch my heart every day. Sometimes it's hard for me to believe that I am living this life with my eternal family. I have been almost guaranteed to die, but I am living now because of God's blessing and grace. In the past, my life was hopeless with gambling, but now I have the best life through the gospel of the resurrection. Amen. I pray that all of you accept the risen Jesus as your Lord and have your homes filled with joy and hope. Thank you.